Welcome back to the Golden Seams. Gabe and Michelle here discussing The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse by Charlie Mackesy. The next section of the book, they're riding on the back of the horse. The boy asks, "What is the bravest thing you've ever said?" And the horse says, "Help." Then the boy goes on and asks, "When have you been at your strongest?" The horse says, "When I have dared to show my weakness."
Hmm.
And the horse says, "Asking for help isn't giving up, it's refusing to give up." That line, asking for help is refusing to give up, and how brave that is. In reading these books, in seeking help, in getting yourself a coach, in being in the self help section of the bookstore, getting a therapist, taking up exercise, whatever it is, painting that you do that allows you to center, reset, or regain yourself, we're saying to you, that's brave. That's what we believe. One of the biggest things that Gabe and I both have discussed is when a person no longer cares, it's far more serious because they have given up.
Apathy is far more destructive even than hatred can be. It restricts any energy from flowing towards the thing or the person or the place, and it's completely removing itself. We're trying to remove something from the cycle of life and experience, and there is a violence to that.
It's huge because to me, when I no longer cared, it was the end of a relationship for me. If I'm in a relationship and I don't care anymore, I'm done. I don't know how to make that come back necessarily. That's very true in marriages. So as long as you're still trying to work it out, it's when you hit that space of not caring. One of the easiest ways that I can think of where you know when you're on the way out of a situation.
Mm.
Gabe and I were discussing this. When you know you're leaving a job, especially when you hate, you don't care.
I was telling Michelle I had worked a retail job in the past. Something happened where I think it was something silly, like they were scheduling me to close the store, and that could be till like 11:30 at night. And then the next morning, I'd have to be there at 6:30 in the morning to stock the coffee. After having had several conversations with the scheduling manager, nothing being done, one day I woke up, I decided I was not going to go to stock the coffee. I slept in till 3 hours past my starting shift, and I walked into the boss's office in my pajamas, and I shook his hand, and I said, "I no longer work here." And then I turned around and I left, and it felt so good. I wouldn't recommend it, but sometimes there's nothing else that's an option in the moment when you're experiencing that level of dissonance,
Disconnect. Yeah.
disconnect. Yeah, drowning. It's good to remember we can free ourselves.
So again, we're saying asking for help means you're still in the game in whatever form that you're asking for help with. And we hope you do it in a constructive way that really does get you help
With kindness.
with kindness. Absolutely. The boy goes on and he says, "Sometimes I worry you'll all realize I'm ordinary." The mole says, "Love doesn't need you to be extraordinary."
Mm.
Just as a contrast, and this is not a put down in any way, everybody's doing their thing. Have you ever stepped back? Have you ever watched a reality TV show and you step back from it? You compare their plight of what they are producing on this reality show, what they're putting out in the world, whatever it is, to someone who you actually see in a real life situation struggling, and they're doing it day in and day out to take care of a family or to provide for their family or to they have a child with special needs. It doesn't matter, whatever it is, their family has a need. And when you see that and you contrast it with the other, I find it so profoundly interesting. I have found that we are all extraordinary.
Yeah.
Through the sessions that I've done with clients, I've done hundreds, I can tell you, I am so humbled. I have never, ever met a person now that I can say it is not extraordinary. And I know that that is for you, it's for anyone listening to this. I absolutely know it. Such a huge truth. The horse goes on to say, we all need a reason to keep going. What's yours? The fox says, you three. The boy says, getting home. The mole says, cake. Never underestimate the power of hope. A lot of times people say, oh, you're just living on hope. Hope, if you got it, the reason it's called that little spark of hope, that little spark can keep you going for a very long time until that next break comes through. And this is a great place in looking over life to make sure that you have defined and you know your why, whatever your why is. What is your reason for enduring and doing what you're doing? It will get you through. If you have that, you know that.
No, it's incredible. The power of a spark. It seems like something so small, but a spark is how you make a flame, and a flame is how you build a fire. And I think we all know how powerful fires can be for survival, safety, warming ourselves, cooking, and how much respect we need to have with that kind of power. It can run on its own too. But to think that we could miss an opportunity to be warmed by a magnificent fire calling out to us just by by not following the hope that our heart has, or to take leap of faith almost towards like you need hope for that too, to continue on a path where you don't know what's on the other side of the forest.
Right?
Yeah, hope keeps you trotting.
It's so completely true. I love the fire analogy. It goes back to make sure you know your reason that you keep going, even if it's
Yes.
cake.
Yeah.
But then the mole goes on and says, I've discovered something better than cake. The boy laughs. No, you haven't. I have, replied the mole. What is it? A hug. It lasts longer. We have been brought back to love and kindness. Nothing beats kindness, said the horse. It sits quietly beyond all things.
Mm. Wow.
I love that so much. I think it's referencing back to that story that I shared previously about that girl, the reciprocation of the kindness she showed to me when I so very badly needed help. I couldn't tell anybody, but she
Mm.
knew. She knew because she had already experienced the finishing schools, her sister. It was just part of our lives. It was such a huge thing. I love, love, love that. It sits quietly beyond all things.
And it brings this attention. I think it's incredible the visual that that line brings, this power in stillness, in the way he's describing kindness as this ever-present, accessible force, option, choice, tool, privilege.
That was over 40 years ago, and I still remember it.
Mm.
When they say kindness sits quietly,
Wow.
I would so much rather have my life be taken up with that space and my attention.
Yeah.
If you let yourself think back and you think back to a kindness and you allow that in and you let yourself feel that, it's so much easier to remember to be kind.
It becomes the building blocks of who we are. I feel like those experiences when we have them. And it goes back to this idea that they explore in the book too of somebody showing us love when we're presenting weakness or fear, anxiety, and to be cared for in a low spot, I think is an invaluable gift that we as humans can give so easily, but for some reason don't right now. Or maybe that's just me and my experience. Hopefully, people are having loving lives with lots of kindness. I see potential for so much more.
You can't have enough of it. That is for
Yeah.
sure. emphasizing that I have to say what I hear from other people and what they're telling me, you're dead on. The horse goes on to say, sometimes, and the boy says, sometimes what? Sometimes just getting up and carrying on is brave and magnificent. This just hits me right in the gut. I
Mm.
think of the parents out there, the students, the people, anybody, any minority group. I think about people who are in jobs that are considered on the low end of the totem pole, going into what you were saying. My daughter is a barista. I can tell you some of the stories that she tells me about the way people conduct themselves. I literally cannot believe I share a planet with these people, and it's not because I am some really great person. I question, where is it ever okay to treat someone with so much disdain or hate or disgust or anger because of, and this is not an invitation for anyone to tell me this because I don't care. I am gonna say that right here and right now. You're gonna find that out about me real quick. I will unplug so fast from the defensiveness of anyone explaining this to me because I know there's a different choice.
Yeah.
To treat another person who is in a service position and mistreat them. I have heard of people throwing coffee at the window of the drive-through. I have heard of people screaming at them. I have heard of people flipping out saying, "This doesn't taste right. You made it wrong. You need decaf." I'm kidding, but I think it.
Maybe a nap.
I feel compassion for the person flipping out like that because I know that they are obviously overburdened. But I want to just put this out there. We have to choose to be better than that.
I completely agree. I've worked food jobs. Sometimes it felt like this, it was the unspoken energy of the customer is always right, seemed to convince people it was a replacement for therapy. So they have these punching bags they can go to that are, for the sake of their survival, they need to hold the position to pay their rent or to feed their families and themselves. They know that they have a certain right to transgress ethical, moral boundaries in that interaction. And a lot of people do. In my experience, I don't want to say everybody out there is having the same experience because I know it's a big world. I saw that often in my position when I was in that job, and obviously not a good place to be having that conversation with customers, right? Like that's nobody wants to hear that at the checkout. It really made me think and reflect about how I am in those situations and how
Mm-hmm. When you die, what is going to come up is your relationship with yourself and with other people. Maybe I'm preaching to the choir when I say this. I just want to extend this out, this awareness. When you go to your hairstylist and they screw up your hair, go communicate with them.
hmm,
Tell them I need it to be different than this, and then help them understand because I guarantee you, if anybody is in a position where they are creating, where they are serving any of those pieces, they are absolutely doing the best they can. And even more so, if they have a family or they have bills, everybody has dreams. Don't be the one that kills somebody else's.
yeah.
I also want to emphasize I am saying this also in hypocrisy because when I was in corporate positions, I was very, very, very corporate. So I've been on both sides of this. You will pay the piper. It's just the cycle of life. It's what we've signed up for here. If you need that space to have compassion on yourself, go have it. To be kind to yourself, do it so that you can be kind to others. Also, know we understand when you can't. We're saying don't extend the hurt to the innocent, to someone who is not there, not inviting it.
I agree so much, and it keeps making me think because sometimes the perceptions in the world are so analytical They use statistics to justify why people should or shouldn't be feeling certain ways. One thing that came up, I forgot where I had seen this. Somebody mentioned how people shouldn't be upset because the unemployment is better than it's ever been. And then somebody brought up the concept of like, what about the dignity of the jobs? There are people who don't get lunch breaks. They have watches to like let them know when their break's over, they have to run or they're running out of time. It's like these dehumanizing positions. If you haven't worked in them or lived through it, you may not know the degradation of the spirit that these people are being subject to. Like, your brothers and sisters in the world are suffering just to survive. So if you spilled your coffee, it's not their fault, nor will it help with
It's
spilled
not going to
coffee.
help. A client once was furious about a flight being late. This client was flipping out, and I said, well, can't you see this time as time for you to rest? Everything around that is outside of your control. I know I come off sometimes as I'm being too strong or condemning or something like that, and I'm being judgmental. I have been on both sides of this. I am telling you, you are going to love yourself so much more. You are going to be so much happier if you always, always carry it forward with kindness. And I am speaking to myself as much as I am to anybody out there. Believe me, it's what I've learned. That's simply what we're sharing here. I hope that comes across with kindness and understanding. I don't know. I'm sure I'll get some feedback on what I've shared here. Another thing that I think is amazing is when I see someone who stays in a difficult job, or I knew a woman once that stayed in a marriage, had all these kids after years and years of marriage, and I mean a very long marriage, that she didn't love her husband. I thought that has got to be one of the most self-sacrificing thing. I'm not condoning it. I was stunned. And that was for this woman, how she chose kindness. For her, she felt she could do. She came back to me later and eventually shared with me that she really learned to love, appreciate, and feel grateful for her husband and her family.
Wow.
She
Wow.
was in a very different space for a very long time. That line, sometimes just getting up and carrying on, is brave and magnificent.
Yeah.
When you look at that other person and it looks like they're not all there, or your coffee isn't made quite right, take that breath and communicate with kindness and see what you can do to ensure that the other person has a better day if you can. Otherwise, make sure you show the kindness to yourself.
Yeah. We can really convey any message with loving kindness if you think about it. It could be the hardest, saddest, most frustrated, but there is a way to translate it into kindness first.
Yeah. They go on in the story, and there are these swans swimming across this lake, gliding, I would assume. The boy says, how do they look so together and perfect? And the horse says, there's a lot of frantic paddling going on underneath. The mole says, the greatest illusion is that life should be perfect. This goes back to that wabi-sabi concept, and in the West, that perfectionism, but also being caught up in that and realizing the perfection in the imperfect,
Yeah.
or what appears to be imperfect.
Honoring the organic, the nature of things, I think, is so powerful. I've seen this picture before where somebody took, it was like a cut of the end of a branch from a pine tree. So you saw the branch and it still had all the pine needles on it. It's like a three-pronged little branch. And then next to it, it says order. And then underneath that photo was another photo where somebody had organized and took off each pine needle and categorized them by color and size and the branches next to each other, comparing. And next to that, they wrote chaos. And I think it's so profound. The more we dissect and break apart nature, it turns into chaos. As much as it looks like logic and order to our mental thinking minds, it's obstructing the organic flow of life and why that thing is there in the first place. Things are not there for us to completely understand so much as I think experience what it's like to be with that tree. Does it matter how many dark green versus light green pine needles that branch had, or how much oxygen it can give back to the system and how much light it can take in? And I think about that, this idea and how many insecurities and shames come from this belief of needing to be a certain way. I very much relate to the swans with the paddling underwater. I feel like I've lived a lot of my life this way, trying to maintain a certain outward composure at the expense of my own kindness to myself or overwork or exhaustion and trying to hide it.
It goes back to my favorite thing, should. Just kidding.
Should.
So not, that's sarcasm. We don't
Yeah.
should on each other,
Yeah.
but we do it to ourselves all the time.
Oh man. More ways than I can count.
The other thing it takes me to is that nobody's perfect.
Yeah. Po buddy's perfect.
Exactly. It's so true. It is
So
way
dumb.
too much work to keep up that facade. I really know this firsthand. It is a facade.
Yeah.
It's exhausting.
Yeah. And it's violence to ourselves because it's coming at the expense of authentic expression or authentic experience or genuine communication. There is no way for those two things to coincide. What you think somebody should perceive you as versus what you are. They do not have your mind. My mind serves no purpose in the authenticity except for creating cohesive thoughts to communicate with. That's it. All the judging and the perceptual distortions that come from fear and shame, I feel much better off when I can silence that part of the mind.
It's so true. The whole overthinking
It's a lot going on in the mind.
is a lot of thinking going on, and sometimes you just gotta shut that down.
The first instinct is thinking that there will be nothing there, but somehow this river flows through the empty space. And it seems to have so much, it feels like my mind when I'm not, when I'm just like steering it with like the sails or something instead of throttling the gas on the motor, it feels so much easier to navigate. And usually my default is pedal to the metal, trying to like throttle full speed. I'm sure it comes from the competitive racing, cultural, whatever energies that I've perceived around me. The experience is so much nicer. And I wind up being able to get to the same places in a much more enjoyable way.
Exactly. I have more now than I've ever had.
Hmm,
If you looked at it from the outside, you might think that I had less, but I actually have more.
hmm.
I have done so much less to have so much more.
Yes.
I feel so much better. It's definitely an illusion. Perfectionism is an illusion. It's very difficult to keep up. I really don't know anybody that exists in that vein or that I'm aware of where when they live in perfectionism, they're happy
I was
because
just gonna bring it back to that. Yep.
it's such a constant state of self-criticism and being critical of every little thing. It's such a hard place to be.
It's this illusion too, because the perfection comes as, for me, like a desire to facilitate success or productivity. So then people will perceive me even more in alignment with the outside and all these misguided thoughts. I don't think that there's anything, any amount of money in the world that can buy the happiness of the scenic route or the wonder of taking a moment to look at the stars. Those things you can't buy any of that. And that seems to be like a huge part of the silver lining of the whole experience is that ability to appreciate that's so easily lost in the hustle of life and the bustle.
It takes me back to this experience that I had. I was driving to work. I had so many deadlines. I had clients, I had deals on the line. My daughter was an infant. Had to drop her off at daycare. Then I had to drive 90 miles an hour literally across the city to get to my place of employment, then work. And then sometimes I would be up until 2 a.m. working, preparing things, taking calls in the car, non-stop. I was putting up with so much politics, so many different things. And I remember My mother happened to call me, and I was just flying across the city. And I answered the phone. I knew it was her, and in the car, and I said, "What's going on?" I didn't say hello, and my mom kind of chuckled and said, "Well, I just called to tell you to have a good day." I lost it. And she said, "Can't you just look out the window and look at a tree and see how beautiful that tree is?" And I go, "Are you effing kidding me? If I take time to stop and look at a tree, I'm gonna wreck one." I said, "The only way I'm gonna look at a tree is if it falls down in the middle of the road and I gotta avoid it." I flipped out. What's so strange is my life actually slowed down to a point. And I was told this by an intuitive way before this happened. And I thought it was the most absurd reading. She said to me, "Your life is going to grind to such a complete halt that the biggest thing that ever happens in your day is you're going to have a cup of coffee. That's going to be your focus." I mean, I had this position, I had all this stuff, all these things on the table. I could check every box. She said that to me, and I remember thinking, what a waste of my time and money. I cannot believe I fell for this. Dismissed what this woman told me, and then that is exactly what happened to my life.
Wow.
It just wound down to where I look forward to my coffee, which is so crazy. Enjoy it because when it takes off again, it's never going to stop until you die. So I'm still in the coffee phase. I don't know what she was talking about, but she was right about the other stuff. I remember when my life ground to a halt. I remember this day and I could see a tree.
Wow.
I started to laugh and I started to cry. Oh my gosh. Looked at this tree and I could see how beautiful it was, swept up in that. And I thought my mother was insane when she said that to me. Get the F out of here. Don't ever call me with this stupid crap,
I don't
right?
need
I
this
mean,
shit.
yeah, I just snapped. I went berserk, you freak. Like I said, I have been on both sides. You do not have to get to where you are ground down to a cup of coffee as the highlight of your day. That is not what I mean. It is so much better so that you don't have to hit that bottom when you fall, because you're going to fall. If you have all these other things in place so that it's actually you changing the trajectory of where you're headed.
Yeah,
You do not need to go that path if you allow yourself to see the signs along the way. Don't get caught up in the perfectionism. And how do you unplug from that? We're going to go into that more. That's what we're doing here. The greatest illusion really is that life should be perfect.
I agree.
With that, we hope you have a great day. Thank you for joining us. We look forward to on our next episode having you join us there.
Thank you, everybody.